Hello research leaders, my name is Eran and this talk is part of the leadership track. As such, we're going to be focused on an intersection between research and strategy. The unique vantage point that I think I can bring to this growing conversation is of a dual role. On the one hand, in the last 2 decades, I've been an applied anthropologist. In my master's, I researched a very special school to better decipher how educational success is actually built and manifested. I spent a year long in that school doing fieldwork. In my PhD studies, I transitioned to tech and I tried to understand how does culture impact the spread of new technologies. In fact, I actually looked at one of Google's products, Google Analytics, that spread like fire around the world, and I tried to understand how it's being used differently and how it's being embraced as the main vehicle to explain marketing expenditures. On the other hand, in the last decade, I've held various product leadership roles. And I've been very fortunate to take part in some highly successful companies and amazing teams. Research has always been at the heart of the contribution I was able to bring to that company. So in the last 5 companies, the first 3, I was able to contribute towards an exit strategy, and they were acquired. In the last 2, when I joined scale-ups, we were able to raise big, large rounds of funding to ensure the continued growth of those companies. It is amazing to take part in this conference. First, it's an opportunity to be part of this larger community, but it's also a testament of how much we've been growing in the last few years. Years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I shared my academic background or my core product management skill, which is doing ethnographic research and deeply understanding what users really need or want or what are their friction points, people didn't really fully understand. Now there's a growing vocabulary and understanding of why research is so needed. That said, many times what happens to me is that when I speak with a researcher, or when someone reaches out to me throughout my network, I hear the repeated same story. They're amazing at doing research, but for some reason it doesn't resonate when they come back to the company. They go out to the field with highly crafted research plans, a great research question, the right scientific rigor. They collect the data, they crunch the data, they come back, they compile it into big, persuasive decks, they pull in the right video snippets. They come to the meeting only to find out that they're boxed into a tactical role again. Go to usability testing, instead of listening to those deep insights that can actually shed light on what that strategy should look like. So what I want to focus on in this talk is on a big elephant in the room. Something that is part and parcel of everything that we envision and evidence in our daily operation in our companies, but we seldom talk about. It's talking about company politics. It's talking about all kinds of words that we're not always feel comfortable talking about. It's buy-in and budget and conflict and power structures and alliances. All these are part of a fabric of any company. My argument would be is that being aware to that fabric and knowing how to mold research into that fabric is key in moving us on the continuum from tactical to become more and more vital and strategic in our impact. I want to follow a storytelling technique and share with you 3 stories from my past. Each story articulates a particular strategic situation and how it evolved. Afterwards, I will extract the key learnings that I took with me from that situation onwards. In addition, after those learnings, I will share with you some practical advice that I've been using ever since. So the first story is situated very early in my career when I took on the role of a VP product for a data company. A few weeks into my role, I spoke with the CEO just to get alignment around mutual sets of expectations. And he told me, look, we have a board meeting coming up in a couple of months, and you know that our strategic direction is moving from small businesses to mid-market. You need to spend the next 6-8 weeks in preparation for that board meeting to come back with a coherent product strategy around how we evolve our product and go beyond the small business offering to the mid-market. So what did I do? The first thing I did is wore my research hat, went out to the field, spoke with customers and prospects, and spent probably 3 or 4 weeks, interviews, actually going out to meet these customers or prospects at their natural habitat, asking a lot of questions, and deep diving into how our technology and our product actually fits into their broader tech stack that they have. After doing that, came back to the office, compiled all of that research into a beautifully designed deck and a bunch of spreadsheets. Also put in all kinds of snippets of real prospects, video snippets that you can hear and see people speaking instead of speaking on their behalf. And I marched naively but fully enthusiastic into the next leadership meeting. When I started presenting my insights, I think it resonated quite well around the product strategy. Great, yeah. But when I started speaking about some of the key insights around how our technology fits into the broader tech stack that the prospects have, I started seeing that some of the leadership team is actually not attentive as I would expect, to the point where I actually saw the VP marketing become pale, even white. And I didn't understand what was going on. As I continued in my presentation towards the end, there were a few recommendations around messaging. How should we articulate our offering to the market in a way that will resonate with these prospects? When I did that, the VP marketing simply walked out of the room and didn't come back to that meeting. I didn't know what happened. Afterwards, I followed up both with the CEO and my peers in the leadership team, and I actually went and spoke with the VP marketing. What I didn't realize walking into that room was that the VP marketing led an effort for the last couple of months, even before I joined the company, around messaging for the mid-market. And everything that I just shared, because it was so persuasive, it wasn't me speaking out of my opinion. It was a carefully curated selection of real prospects, and hearing what they're saying, it actually contradicted many of the risky assumptions that VP marketing had. Now, afterwards, we solved the issue, and everything was well and good for the board meeting, but I learned a very important lesson. And that lesson is that knowledge is power. Knowledge, as researchers in the front lines gathering from real prospects and real customers, is almost like fire. On the one hand, it can ensure the survival of the company, right? Even making it thrive and get closer and closer to product or market fit, or closer and closer to building an amazing product out there. But at the same time, the same knowledge, which is fire, can actually burn people if you're not careful in how you use it. And that's the key learning that I learned. Knowledge is power, and power is fire. Afterwards, when I followed up with the VP marketing, I extracted some very practical advice that I've been using ever since. He told me, Eran, it's too bad that you didn't join the company earlier. That way, we could have embarked on this journey together and make sure that the messaging and the product strategy are one, and make sure that we can then expand to the mid-market with a higher degree of success. What I took from that is that timing of research is really important. Timing is everything. Now, what I did since then is that when I join a company, is I take a blank piece of paper and I just plot all those events throughout the year where strategy is formulated, those decision forks in time. So it can be a board meeting, and board meetings are extremely helpful, not only because this is the place where the CEO and the executive team actually are accountable to the results and the strategy of the company, but many times these become milestones that everything within the company then gets into the planning phase and almost decision point. So a board meeting is great. The second is the annual planning cycles. And the third can be a launch of a new product. And once we have all of these plotted, then it's easy to work backwards. And what do you need to do? Is to make sure that you have enough resources allocated to create that critical mass of insight. But it's not only having that insight in place which is important. If you work backwards and you work on those strategic initiatives around gathering insights and having it ready for decision making, you can also ensure that your VP marketing or other stakeholders that could have been burnt by that knowledge can join you in that journey towards that specific decision. The second story is later in my career. I joined one of the companies, and pretty quickly I realized that one of the strongest figures and also a great person is the CFO of the company. As I was joining more and more of these exec, weekly and monthly meetings, I understood that everything is discussed through a financial lens. Everything is discussed in monetary terms. That's the vocabulary that allows all the executive team to circle around and actually make decisions. Now, as a product person and as a researcher, I don't usually think about primarily the economic ramifications or implications of my product strategy. Yes, of course, we are building every time in a company tech, we're trying to build a viable business. But as a chief product officer or a VP product, I'm first and foremost focused on making sure that the product is exceeding expectations and the engagement and retention are skyrocketing. Now, that translation exercise between the product world or design world around how desirable the product is and the financial and economic and business world is a constant effort. As a C-level exec, you are constantly asked to explain whatever your team is working on in those financial terms. And a big thing of what I've learned is that in order to do so in a persuasive way, you need to make an extra effort in that translation. So when I spoke at first with the CFO and I told him, look, we are working on a new product and we are also working on making sure that the existing product line is actually better. He said, okay, but how much money is that actually going to create? And when I spoke to him and I brought some, great customer testimonials about how much our customers love our products and also opportunity to make our product better, he asked the same question again. I realized that going to the point where I can make sure that we have a coherent and persuasive product strategy that creates that engagement and creates that retention and other key metrics that make a lot of sense in the product world is simply not enough. So what I did is I started translating those terms into terms that make sense from a financial perspective. And I'll give you one example. What I did is I said, we need more researchers to join our growing team. And the CFO asked, can you explain why? Very quickly, I moved away from just explaining this through a product vocabulary, and I used a financial vocabulary. And I said, for every researcher that we're going to add to our team, we're going to have two positive outcomes. One is that we're going to increase the velocity of our engineering team. Second is that we're going to increase the outcome or the probability to a favorable outcome by the end of the quarter or by the end of the year. And the way I plotted it is I showed him an Excel spreadsheet, a very simple one. Here's the number of engineers, the number of product people, and the number of researchers. Every researcher who's doing a really great job, and most of us do a great job, they can make sure that we're building the right product. Building the right product then translates into the number of iterations as a product engineering team that we need to go through until we get to that feature to product to market fit. Now, if we decrease the number of iterations, we are actually increasing the velocity of our engineering team. So researchers have a clear monetary value that they can bring to the table. A second outcome is that we can start creating more and more confidence for our teams that they're actually building the right product. Now this goes beyond the team, because the moment you know that you're embarking on X number of projects in parallel and you have a higher degree of confidence they will actually yield the results you're expecting, the teams feel more confident, but also teams outside the product organizations start to look at product and engineering in a more favorable light. As a result, research actually helps in two very different ways. One is creating that flywheel, internal flywheel, in making product engineering go faster and faster with less iterations needed. The second is a growing confidence in these organizations, which is as important. What I encourage you to do is go out and identify the dominant discourse at your company. Identify the key stakeholders that actually own that vocabulary around making the decisions around hiring, budget, and strategy. And once you identify them, then go and make a conscious effort not only in understanding what that vocabulary means, but in translating your insights and your contribution into terms that make sense to those people. Because if you do that, you are making research much more strategic. And it allows research to move away from only supporting product or design, but also having a seat around the strategy decision-making table. The third story I want to share with you is for more recently. I joined as a C-level executive, a chief product officer to an EdTech company. And one of the key things that I realized very quickly in my first week in my role was that despite the fact that the company has been in existence for over 8.5 years, it didn't have a researcher role. So what did I do? I hired my first researcher, a director of research. But the fact that there was no researcher doesn't mean that the company didn't have research. It just meant that there was no such role in the company. Now, when you bring in a new person, a new role, a director level role into a company, without a clear definition of that job description and what's expected to be done, and on top of that, also, you acknowledge that there are some people in the company who have been working 5, 6, maybe 8 years within the company and have accumulated an immense understanding of prospects and customers. How do you bring and ease in their transition and bring in that role into the company? That's the key question I asked myself when I hired the director of research. Now, why did I want to bring a director of research? For two key reasons. One, a lot of the data and information around customers was very siloed. Yes, there was deep knowledge, but it was not synthesized into a unified body of knowledge. That prohibited some of the teams to move forward and actually tap into that body and actually make a lot of good decisions. The second reason was that when I looked at some of the studies that were made, I had some questions around how scientifically rigorous they are. And as a result, I wanted someone to come in and make sure that how rigorous scientifically the studies are made are at the right level. So one of the questions that the director of research asked me after he was onboarded a couple weeks after I joined the company was, Eran, tell me, which conversation should I join? And I was puzzled for a moment. I didn't understand what he was talking about. And when I asked him, what do you mean by that? He said, I want to make sure that wherever I go and whatever research I do, I want to make sure I'm impactful. And I fully understand that this company has already done a lot of research. And I want to make sure that whenever I come back with my own insights, they don't overcome or overshed some other people's understandings of our customers. And that's exactly what we embarked on. We did a mapping of all the existing conversations, strategic conversations that are happening within the organization. First within our team and our department, the product team, then also together with other execs within their organizations. And then we started cutting across these conversations to see which ones actually are inter-department. So for example, looking at retention, customer retention or customer acquisition or other key questions cut across the entire company. And because we understood that these conversations already exist, a lot of what our director of research did was first synthesize those research and studies into a coherent view, together with all the stakeholders who conducted that research to that point. And the second thing is identify gaps in knowledge or gaps in understanding that that researcher could fill. The second thing that we did is we tried to understand how can we get a lot of credibility pretty quickly for this new position. And what we did is we identified a really great research that was just completed, the buyer persona research, and we built on top of it. So what we did is we took one of those personas and we conducted a follow-up study where we went deep around the technographics of these buyers and went deep around some of the product friction. So basically building a more holistic view of what that buyer is, beyond the marketing and messaging that the marketing team did an amazing job. And when we came to the executive team meeting to present those insights, we presented this together with the marketing team. We presented this together with the marketing team for two reasons. One, it was an extension of their work. And the second, because we knew that the persona research already was vetted by the executive team, and because the persona research was already had the credibility within the organization, showing that our research, which could have been an independent research endeavor, is an extension to it, actually was able to take advantage of that credibility also for our endeavor. So I have two pieces of practical advice here for you. One, make an effort and just map out the conversations. What is the conversation map in your company, in your organization? What is top of mind in terms of strategy formulation? Can you take part in it? Are there any gaps there that you could fill in with your research and your insights? The second thing is that after you map out the conversations within your company, ask yourself which conversations already have studies, research, have credibility that you can build on. Very similar to standing on the shoulders of giants in science, where you look at philosophers and their progress and you're trying to build an extra step. Try to use the same within your company, your organization. If there is something, an effort that already got a lot of credibility, leverage that. Build on top of that. Research can be molded and formulated and communicated in many different ways. If you build on top of others, it's not only that you are gaining that credibility, you are actually creating a much more holistic understanding of your prospects and customers. Because when research is almost presented in silo or separately from other efforts, they're almost seen as in competition with each other. So I think many times when we take an extra effort in trying to understand how we can weave and synthesize and actually connect to other efforts that exist within our organization, we are doing service to how much impact we can create. The impact is because we create a holistic understanding of our buyers and our customers. The last thing I want to talk about has nothing to do with the stories I just shared with you. It's an insight that I generated over time in understanding what is the state of research within the company. Almost like a litmus test. And it came from a conversation or a series of conversations I had with one of my former CEOs. And also, over the years, I've heard it time and again from some of the board members. It is the notion, and they didn't term it this way, but in terms that we understand, I called it organizational triangulation. Now, in research, we're all familiar with triangulation, where you get insights, right, from 3 or 4 different stakeholders within a space that have no connection with each other, then you feel that there is more validity to whatever they said. There's a strong signal around that specific insight. The same also is internal to your company. Many times when a CEO or a board member, they don't have a lot of time and they are bombarded with information. Now they need to sift through the noise in making sense what is really important and what's not. What is valuable and real and has validity and weight to it, and what doesn't. Many times what they do is they speak with multiple stakeholders around a key question, and if they hear the same insight or they hear the same lesson learned time and again from different people, in their minds it becomes a stronger insight, a stronger nugget they can actually build strategy on. So a great way to better understand if research is actually impacting strategy is by starting to be more aware if you are creating ripple effects and the same information and the same knowledge, insights actually resonate with people throughout your organization. It's almost like a reach of your impact within the company. And if this starts to move not only across your peers or the peer level of other researchers, product organization, a director level, a VP, but actually gets to the executive team, that's exactly the place you want to be. Now, a practical advice there is you can leverage your exec. Ask them, do other people talk about research? And if not, what should we be doing to make sure that research is not just something that we do, but other people actually talk about? Okay, to summarize, 4 pieces of practical advice. The first, build a decision calendar. A decision calendar will allow you to understand when are strategic decisions made, when are hiring and budget decisions are made. Work backwards from there and then make sure you have enough impact and you're bringing enough other stakeholders in your journey towards that decision. Second advice is learn the dominant vocabulary, the dominant discourse in your company, and make sure you are actively translating everything you're doing into that discourse. Leverage your executive team member for that. Because the moment you are able to do that, then research cannot be disregarded as something tactical, but it's actually strategic and needed for the company. Third, map out the strategic conversations that are happening within your company. Leverage your exec for that. And once you identify those, decide which ones you want to take part in. And also build your credibility on existing and past efforts from other stakeholders. This is so key because it extends your reach beyond your department. And as such, it creates a holistic understanding of prospects and customers. Fourth, practice organizational triangulation. Go and speak with someone outside your organization in sales, customer success, perhaps marketing, and ask them, did they ever use one of the research insights that you and your team generated? If yes, great. If no, then you should ask yourself, how can you make sure that they will start using those nuggets? But that is only the starting point. Also leverage your exec and ask him or her to ask their peers whether or not research has extended its reach beyond your specific department. This is so crucial because it will allow you, if you do this on an ongoing basis, week over week, month over month, to understand where you are on the continuum between tactical impact and strategic impact. Because strategy is not only being at the right time in the right place when the CEO or the leadership is making that decision, it's also being part and parcel of the fabric of your organization in all those micro decisions. So macro decisions and strategy is great, but another form of strategy is when more people within an organization leverage research for that purpose. I want to end this talk with a saying, a quote from Sun Tzu. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Now, everything I talked about in this session did talk about company politics. But I hope that you understand that I do not mean that we should become negative or evil or manipulative. The only thing that I think could help us is becoming more aware of how our companies are functioning. What are the mechanics around decision making, around hiring, around budget, around strategy formulation? And the moment we are more aware of that, then we can also weave research into that fabric in a way that creates much more impact. I'm looking forward to join the Slack conversation, and I hope that you found this talk both relevant and practical. See you soon.